Well, welcome. How y'all doing this morning? Y'all good? Come on, we can do better. Let's go. Before we start, let's just welcome everybody watching online. Can we welcome everybody right now? Come on. We don't know what they're doing right now, but they're watching, so we're excited about that right there. Man, that series is next week. It is going to be amazing. We're kicking that off next week. Anybody ever wish you could hear God's voice? Anybody? Yeah. Anybody ever wish it was clearer? You ever think you just meant like my prayers are not even like getting past the ceiling? It's because you're on the wrong frequency. And so we're going to be talking about that next week. Pastor Rodney will be back, and we're just excited about that as well. Pastor Rodney is driving back right now from Lynchburg, Virginia, where he has been spending the weekend with his youngest daughter, Ashlyn, and it was homecoming up there at Liberty, and so just so cool to be able to see Pastor Rodney and his daughter, Ashlyn, just hang out. Good to spend some good quality time together, but he will be right back here next week. So I promise you, you do not want to miss it as we do this series, kick this off next week. It's going to be awesome. How y'all doing? Y'all good? Y'all good? All right, y'all seem awake this morning. Worship, man, just excited that you guys are here. I want to share with you this morning, in the little time that I have, I want to share with you this morning something that is really just kind of near and dear to my heart. It's something that, if I was honest, I would say that it's something that I kind of struggle with. It's something that I have to watch myself with. If I don't watch really carefully, it can affect me. And so this morning, if you've never heard me teach before, I just want you to know that I want to be real with you. I want you to understand this is something that I go through. Maybe you can relate to me this morning, but we're going to have a good time. And if you're ready to have fun, say yes. Pastor Rodney asked me earlier this week, he said, what are your points that you're sharing? And I looked at him and I said, I don't have any points. And he said, huh? And he said, well, how are you going to explain? I said, well, I just want to talk. Can I just talk to you this morning? Is that okay? Can I just talk? The notes you can go through the message notes and look and see the app and stuff. But this morning, I just want to talk to you. I just want to get real. Anybody like to travel? Anybody like to travel? My wife and I, we love to travel. In the last 16 years that we've been married, we've had the ability and the opportunity, I should say, to travel all over the world. It's been amazing just to see cool things. Anybody ever been to New York City? New York City. Oh, yeah, some New Yorkers. All right. Don't throw nothing at me. I know how y'all can be. So our first trip that my wife and I ever took together was to New York City. I got married when I was 21. She was 20. And we got married May 2001, and September 2001, we know what happened up there in the city and the tragedy that happened there. And so a couple months after that, December 2001, we thought it would be a great idea because we were 20 and 21 to go to Times Square to watch the ball drop on New Year's Eve. I mean, who wouldn't want to do that, right? I mean, there's half the world is there. It's crazy. But we decided that's what we wanted to do. So we were living in Virginia at the time, and so we had the opportunity. So we drove to New York City. I'll never forget, I was terrified driving in the city. My wife, her car was a little bit better. I had a big old Jeep, and she had a little two-door Honda Civic. And so we drove that little Honda Civic, little red two-door Honda Civic. Here I am, 6'1", driving this two-door Honda Civic into the city. I had booked a hotel in Times Square. That's what the description said, in Times Square. And so I booked it to be in Times Square because I knew that's where the ball dropped. And I wanted to be close. We had never been there before. And so I said, okay, I'm going to do it. We got there at like midnight. We drove in, we got there at midnight, and it was awesome. We got checked in. By the time we got up to our room, it was like 1 o'clock in the morning, and we opened up the curtains there. We looked down, and if you've ever been to New York City at 1 a.m., it don't matter, right? I mean, it's like the city that never sleeps. I mean, it's always awake. And so there's just as many people at 1 a.m. down there. I'm like, where are you going? And I didn't know where they were going, but I wanted to join them. And so I looked at my wife and I said, let's go. And so she said, let's go. So we were young and stupid. And so we went down and we got in the elevator. We walked down the elevator, rode down the elevator, door open. We walk outside, New York City. Here we are. So grab her by the hand. You got to understand, this is my first husband thing, plan the trip myself. So I got her by the hand. We just start walking, and we start walking. We're walking, and she said, "Wow!" And I'm like, "Yeah, I thought Times Square would be brighter." And we're walking, and it's darker and darker and darker. And I'm thinking, she goes, "Do you know where we're going?" Of course. We're going to Times Square. She didn't ask me if I knew how to get there. And I said, I know where we're headed. And so we start walking, and we're walking, and we're walking. It's amazing how dark it gets. And then we get farther and farther into our little walk, and I start to see people that don't look at me very nice. And it's like 1 a.m., 2 o'clock probably now. My heart starts beating a little faster. She tells me to stop squeezing her hand. And I finally admitted, I'm like, I don't know. Hotel said Times Square. I don't see it anywhere. And so we made a couple left-hand turns and made another left-hand turn. And finally, we began to see some lights. And so my heart stopped beating out of my chest. I loosened my grip on her. And all of a sudden, it's like, there it is, Times Square. It was amazing. It was awesome. I mean, we were gazing up at all the lights and everything. And so we start walking through Times Square, and had been walking probably 40 minutes before we got to Times Square, and all of a sudden we're probably 5 minutes or less into Times Square, and she looks up and she goes, oh, look, it's our hotel. I said, well, what do you know? It is. Right there in the middle of Times Square. You know what happened? We walked out the side door to the hotel. And so instead of walking literally 3 minutes to Times Square, we were walking due west. Due west. If you've ever been to Manhattan or Times Square, north, south, east, west, if you go east, west, you go nowhere except neighborhoods and places you probably shouldn't go. And that's where we were. I was completely unaware that I was going out the side door. I just thought it was the door. The elevator opened up, I walked out, it's a door, here we go. And I'll never forget thinking, like, how in the world could I have been so unaware of where I was? How in the world could I be so unaware of where I was going, but yet think to myself how aware I was? And it was amazing because as we were there, and as I was looking up, I thought, you know what else in my life am I completely unaware of? I mean, what else in my life am I unaware of that I need to be completely aware of? And I begin to think as I was thinking about even speaking this morning and helping you on this journey, this story, helping you understand how important awareness is. And I believe that so many times in our lives, we are completely unaware of things that we should be aware to and aware of. I ask God on a daily basis to raise my awareness. I ask God to raise my awareness and my purpose on earth, my purpose for being here. I don't want to walk through life unaware of what God desires for me. Anybody else like that? I ask God all the time to raise my awareness when it comes to the needs of people around me. How many needs do we miss of the people in our community, the people in our coworkers, our classmates? How many needs do we walk right by because our awareness is so bad? I mean, think about the last 60 days for our nation has been nuts. I mean, I'll never forget sitting at my home and watching as Hurricane Harvey hit Houston. I mean, Houston, who thinks of Houston? Unless you have family in Houston. We think about it around here because pastor's family's from there, but like Houston, it's just Houston. Like, and you begin to see like just the devastation. And now Houston is on everyone's radar. And I'll never forget, we had a family at our church that called us, and they have a big rig, and the church has a 26-foot trailer, and we got a phone call. Pastor Rodney and this gentleman and his family said, listen, we're driving to Houston. We're taking the rig and we're taking the trailer. We're leaving in 48 hours. In 48 hours, we need you, and this is what he's telling us as a staff, we need you to let people know what we're doing. We need to pack the rig and we need to pack the trailer. And I'll never forget Pastor Rodney telling me this, and I'm thinking, oh man, 48 hours, that's like, we can't even promote it on a Sunday. Like we can't, it's not, I mean, like, how are we going to, and Pastor Rodney said, we're going to do it, let's tell the people. And it was amazing, in less than 48 hours, our church came together. They brought supplies, they brought donations, they brought diapers and waters and toiletries and blankets and towels. And do you know that in 48 hours, that rig and that trailer were filled to capacity? Filled to capacity. And that family drove it to Houston. What was it, a week later? Hurricane Irma. Again, sitting in my home, watching my TV. seeing this hurricane come through the Caribbean, knowing that it's going to hit the Keys somewhere, knowing it's going to hit South Florida somewhere, whether it's Miami or Fort Myers, it's going to hit somewhere. And watching Hurricane Irma as it hit Keys and as it went up Fort Myers and then came right through our area. And I'll never forget, as the hurricane passed through our area the next morning, we didn't have power here at our Conway location. And so we gathered at Pastor Rodney's home, and our staff was sitting around the table, and we had our computers open, and we were looking on Facebook, and we were looking at Instagram, and we were looking at those things and seeing the devastation that many of you posted about your homes. And there was a specific post that went up, and it was a dear friend of ours, somebody that's been coming to our church for a long time, and his family, and they live just north of here. And I'll never forget looking at that picture of his home, and it literally looked like a war zone. I'm talking massive oak trees had fallen. They had just purchased a vehicle for their daughter, and a tree had literally landed on the vehicle. And our hearts were broken because we know this family. This family's been so good to us as a church. And I'll never forget, Pastor Rodney said, "Chad, pick up the phone, let's call him." And so I picked up the phone and I called my friend, and I said, "Man, I just saw your posting on Facebook." And I said, I look at it and I said, "Man, my heart breaks for you. What can we do for you?" And I'll never forget what he said on the phone. He said, "Man, I'm good." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Chad, you're not going to believe it." He said, "As soon as the storm was over," he said, "I walked outside, and all of a sudden my neighbors just started walking out of their home. And before I know it, my neighbors had literally all come to my yard, and chainsaws were going, but people were cutting trees and limbs, and the tree was off my daughter's car, and they were doing all that." He said, "Chad, you're not going to believe it. My yard looks better now than it did before the hurricane." And then he said, and then when we were done with my yard, we all got together and we went to my neighbor's yard. And then when we were done at their yard, we went to the other. He said, "Chad, people I didn't even know their names." He said, it was amazing. He said, it was crazy. He said, "We're like 2-3 houses in. We got all this debris. We didn't know where we were going to put it." He said, "One of my other neighbors, he owns a bobcat. So here he comes rolling down the road with a bobcat, just pushing the debris." And it was amazing to me to think that when your awareness goes up, things happen. When your awareness is lifted, you can begin to make an impact, and you can begin to make a difference in the lives of people. Neighbors that he hadn't talked to in years, their awareness was lifted, and an impact was made. I mean, shortly after that, which is crazy, you see Maria out there in the Caribbean, and in just a matter of moments, our sister land, Puerto Rico, I mean, it's literally just devastated. I mean, some of my best friends that have family members on that island, and I remember talking to them in the lobby and talking to them on the phone and saying, I haven't talked to my mom, I haven't talked to my dad, literally waiting weeks to hear from people. And it was amazing to see that Puerto Rico right there just devastated, and it was unreal just to be able as a church to gather, and through the tithe and the offering and the mission money, every dollar that comes in, 10% goes back out, and to be able to take and to write a check for $5,000 to Samaritan's Purse because they are feet on the ground in Puerto Rico, and be able to give that check to Samaritan's Purse because of your faithful giving, to be able to give that check and to know that people got tarps that had no roofs, people got solar lights that had no power, people got buckets to carry clean water that had no water, and to think that we made an impact and you made a difference because of your faithful giving each and every week where we can see it. But you know what? Honestly, 60 days ago, unless you have family in Puerto Rico, the only thing we knew about Puerto Rico was it was a beautiful place to stop when you're on a cruise. Am I right? But it's amazing how when you raise your awareness, things can happen. You can make an impact and a difference. And so I begin to think in my own life, what is it that I need to raise my awareness on? What is it that I need to raise my awareness, up my awareness so that I can make an impact and I can make a difference in my life? And I begin to think, well, what is it in my life that happens that brings my awareness down? Because if we're not careful, in a few weeks, in a few months, our awareness to even Houston, our awareness to South Florida, our awareness to Puerto Rico will slide back down. And I begin to think, and you know what happens? What happens in our life when our awareness starts going back down? Do you know what it is? It's a word called complacency. And if you're not careful, complacency can kill your awareness. Complacency can kill your awareness. And I think about complacency, and complacency is known as the middle ground. The middle ground. You know, it's like you're not this and you're not that. And I believe that so many people, they live in the middle. They're just existing. And you know, I don't want to be somebody that just says, you know what, hey, you know what, that Chad guy, he's living in the middle. I tell you what, that Chad, man, you know what? He's a middle. He just lives in the middle. No, I don't want people to say that of me. And you know, when I begin to think about that and complacency, and I begin to think about living in the middle, I begin to look at the Bible and say, what does the Bible say about living in the middle? What does the Bible say about complacency? And so there's a story in the book of Revelation. How many of you know the book of Revelation? Last book in the Bible, right? It's a crazy book. Right? Crazy book, lots of crazy stuff in the book. But at the very beginning of the book of Revelation, there's letters that are written to certain churches. And the letters that are written to churches, there's one in particular, and the church that it's written to is the church of Laodicea. And maybe you've heard this before, but the church of Laodicea was a real place, it was a real town, and it found itself in the middle. And so what does the book of Revelation, I think we have it up here, what does the book of Revelation say about the middle? Well, this church that's Laodicea, in the middle it says this. It goes and says, I know all the things you do, that you are neither hot nor cold. I know all the things you do. Wonder how many people would say that. I know all the things you do. They're neither hot or cold. They're in the middle. Look what it says. It says, I wish that you were one or the other. But since you are like lukewarm water, neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth. What does the Bible say about living in the middle? You know, I have a son. He's just over a year old. He likes to eat most things. And when he doesn't like to eat something, he lets me know. We're trying to teach him right now that it's okay if you don't like it to take it out of your mouth and set it on a plate. He chooses to simply spit it out. He don't like it, he spits it out. When you don't like something, what do? You spit it out. The Bible's very clear about God's view of the middle. God's view of the middle is it's detestable. It's so bad that you don't even just pluck it out of your mouth and set it down. No, it's so bad you spit it out of your mouth. What does the Bible say about the middle? The Bible says it's detestable. The Bible says that it's so bad, he just wants to spit us out. He says, I wish that you were either one or the other, hot or cold. And I love this because this passage is so misconstrued so many times. And maybe even in your mind, you're thinking, well, that either means that you're supposed to be for people or against people, but don't just be in the middle. Or you're supposed to do good, or hey, if you don't do good, just do bad. You know, I mean, that's just to do bad. It says do one or the other, to be good or bad, hot or cold, but don't be in the middle. That's not what this verse says. This verse gives us one option, and it's to make an impact. Let me explain to you what I mean. This town called Laodicea, this town in the Bible was in between two other towns. Now bear with me for a moment. I want to teach you something. If it's okay, say yes. Okay, so listen. So Laodicea is in the middle. On this side of town was a town called Hierapolis. Aren't you glad you don't live there? Can you imagine addressing those envelopes? Yeah. Okay, Hierapolis. All right. Now, on this side was a town called Colossia. Now, you might have heard of Colossia. There's a book in the Bible called Colossians, right? Paul writes a letter to the people of Colossia. They're called Colossians. So you have Colossia here, you have Laodicea here, you have Hierapolis here. See, during this time, Laodicea, what they had was they had money. It was a very wealthy town. But one thing they did not have was they had no water. And because they had no water, they had to go find a water supply. So on the right-hand side, this area over here called Hierapolis, all right, this town was known for their hot water springs. Anybody ever been to a hot water spring, the hot springs? That's crazy, right? Pretty cool, right? Anybody ever pulled a muscle, right, throughout your back? What did the doctor say? Put heat on it. Right? Not put heat on it. Why? Because he knows that heat can heal. So heat can heal. And so what happens is, at the hot water place here in Hierapolis, people would go there for spiritual healing. So they were making an impact. They were doing something good. They were not living in the middle. They were making an impact. So people would go there to experience these hot water springs. On the other side here in Colossia, what they had was they had cold water springs. Everybody ever been to a cold water spring? Okay? Now, anybody ever pulled something throughout your back? Doctor says, don't put heat on it, put ice on it. Good, 4 of you. Only 4 of you? Really? Put what on it? Ice. Okay, good. There's older people in here than I thought. So, ice on it right here. Okay, so put ice on it. So, this town was known for their cold water springs, which meant spiritual refreshment. So, here you got spiritual refreshment. Here you got spiritual healing. The problem is, in Laodicea, you got nothing. They were just living in the middle. So, they decided to do something. They decided, since they had all this money and no water, to build pipes. And so the pipes would go to Hierapolis. And they thought, man, if we can just pipe in that water there. The problem is, by the time the water got from Hierapolis to Laodicea, it was what? It was lukewarm. Lukewarm. Well, ain't nobody ever want nothing lukewarm. Anybody like coffee? Right? You like hot coffee? You like iced coffee? I was going through Starbucks the other day. True story. We walk over to Starbucks every morning, grab a cup of coffee. Okay, I'm walking through, and I hear a guy order in the drive-thru. Yes, I'd like a lukewarm coffee. That guy should be punched in the throat. Who orders a lukewarm? Can you imagine living with that guy? If you're married right now, listen, look at your husband and say, thank you for not being him. You know what I'm saying? Come on, lukewarm. Anybody want lukewarm? Hot? Sure. Iced? Yes. But lukewarm? So Hierapolis, they got there, it was lukewarm. Same thing from Colossae. By the time they got from the water from the cold and they piped it into Laodicea, what was it? Lukewarm. Lukewarm does no good. Complacency does no good. Living life in the middle does no good. Nobody goes to get lukewarm water. That's not what's making an impact. It's not what's making a difference. And because it's not making an impact, because it's not making a difference, we don't want to be there. Aren't you thankful for a church that doesn't want to live in the middle? Aren't you thankful for a church that wants to make good? Aren't you thankful for a church that wants to make a difference? Whether it's spiritual healing or refreshment. Man, I'm telling you what, we're passionate about reaching lost. We're passionate about reaching people. We're passionate about serving others. That's why we do Serve Day on Saturday, November the 4th. Saturday, November the 4th, as a church, we're going to be serving our community. Not the 5th, the 4th. It was mistaken there, my bad. It was the 4th. So Saturday, November the 4th, Serve Day. Why? Because we want you to get out of the middle and make an impact in someone's life. And so when we think about getting out of the middle, I look at that and I think to myself, you know, in my life, I never want to miss the obvious because I'm living oblivious. I don't want to miss what's obvious because I choose to live oblivious. You can walk through your schools, you can walk through your workplaces, you can walk through your communities, and if you're not careful, you're going to miss the obvious because you choose to live oblivious. I don't want to be a church that misses the obvious because we're oblivious. I want to be a church that's making an impact. I want to be a church that's looking for the needs of others. I want to be a person. I want to be an individual. That my awareness is raised for the needs of the people around me. I don't want to just live. I don't want to just exist. I want to make an impact. I want to make a difference. I believe too many of us, we live oblivious. Therefore, we miss the obvious. Think about the conversations you had this past week. How many conversations did you have? You had a conversation with somebody this week. Their life is falling apart, and you don't even know it. There's a coworker that you sit by every day. There's a classmate that you see every day, and their world is falling apart, and you're too oblivious to see something that's so obvious. You know, there's a story in the book of Samuel, 1 Samuel, and I love this passage because it's about a boy named Samuel and his teacher named Eli. And you have, it'll be up here, but you have Eli. It says, meantime, the boy Samuel served the Lord by assisting Eli. Here's Samuel serving God, and he's serving God by assisting Eli. It says, now in those days, messages from the Lord were very rare, and visions were quite uncommon. One night, Eli, who was almost blind by now, had gone to bed. You had Samuel and Eli. So you had Eli, he was almost blind. He was an old guy, he had been serving God for a long time. Samuel was there to help him. He gets up and he goes to bed. Well, it says that the lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was sleeping in the tabernacle near the Ark of the Covenant. Don't have a lot of time to get into this, but I encourage you to research a little bit about the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant was located in the tabernacle, in the temple, and it was the highest place of honor in that temple. And once a year, the presence of God himself would descend upon the Ark of the Covenant. And the Ark of the Covenant that was there, very few people, only the highest priests could go in there and be a part of that Ark of the Covenant. And so it was crazy because you have Samuel, he's sleeping as close to the Ark of the Covenant as possible. Why? Because he wants to be as close to God as possible. He wants to be as close to God as possible. He's a little boy, he's anxious, he's eager, and he just wants to be close to God. So he sleeps every night in the temple right next to the presence of God. And I love this. It says, while he was sleeping, all right, it says, suddenly the Lord called out, Samuel? Yes, Samuel replied. What is it? He got up and he ran to Eli. I love it. Here I am. Did you call me? I didn't call you, Eli replied. Go back to bed. Samuel hears this voice, and so he gets up out of bed. He runs to Eli. He says, yes, you need me? Eli says, I didn't call you. Go back to bed. This happens 3 more times. Look what it says. It says, go back to bed. So he did. Then the Lord called out again, Samuel. Again, Samuel got up and went to Eli. Here I am. Did you call me? I didn't call you, my son. Eli said, go back to bed. Look at the next one. Samuel did not yet know the Lord because he had never heard a message from the Lord before. So the Lord called the 3rd time. And once more Samuel got up and went to Eli. Here I am. Did you call me? I love this. Can you imagine Eli? Yo, homie, I did not call you. Let an old man sleep. Then all of a sudden, Eli, he got it. I love it. He said, then Eli realized, man, I'm so thankful. Eli realized it was the Lord who was calling the boy. So he said to Samuel, go and lie down again. And if someone calls again, say, speak, Lord, your servant is listening. So Samuel went back to bed. Last one. And the Lord came and called as before, Samuel, Samuel. And Samuel replied, speak, your servant is listening. Listen, I want to tell you something this morning. Some of you, your awareness is down. Some of you, your awareness is down. Complacency is slid in. The only way you can raise your awareness, the only thing that will get your awareness to the level that it needs to be is to find yourself in an intimate place with God where you can hear his voice. And you know, this morning, maybe I can be your Eli. Maybe I can be your Eli. Maybe God's been calling out to you and you've been going to something else. God's been calling out to you and you've been going somewhere else. I want you to know something this morning. If I can be your Eli, I want to tell you what Eli told Samuel. Go to the presence of God. Find yourself in an intimate spot and then stop and lay down. And when the Lord speaks to you, simply reply with, your servant is listening. How many of us miss what God wants for us because we're too busy talking? How many of us miss what God wants for us because we're too busy just going? I want you to stop this morning, and I want you to realize that God has a plan and God has a purpose for your life. And all he wants you to do is live outside of the middle. He wants you to find spiritual refreshment, spiritual healing. He wants you to live your life making an impact and a difference for people. Don't miss what's obvious because you're living oblivious. Raise your awareness. Raise your awareness for the things of God. Raise your awareness for the purpose of God. Raise your awareness so you're not spit out for being lukewarm. Raise your awareness. And the only way to raise your awareness is to raise your intimacy with him. If the only time you hear from God is for this 1 hour on a Sunday, you're missing it. Some of you, the only God you get is right here. For an hour, you come in those doors, you fill this chair, and in a moment, you're going to get up and you're going to walk out. God wants more for you. That's why we have Serve Day. That's why we have life groups. That's why we have Growth Track. Why? For us? No, for you. For you. We don't want you to live by yourself. We want you to find your place. We want you to find your place. We want you to find who you are. We want you to use the influence that you have. That's why it's step 3 today. You get to experience step 3. It's leadership. Leadership is influence. Give us 1 hour today. Well, I didn't make plans. No, give us 1 hour. As soon as we're done, walk right to the orange room and allow God to get you out of the middle. Some of you have been coming to this church for years and you're still in the middle. You're not in a life group. You haven't gone through Growth Track. You aren't serving. You don't meet needs. You're just living in the middle. Get out of the middle. I don't want to be a church full of people in the middle. I want to be a church with people that are fired up about making an impact and a difference in the lives of other people. And I invite you to join us because we ain't stopping. There's good news and there's bad news. The good news is we're doing it. The bad news is if you don't come on with us, you're going to miss it. So join us. Would you do me a favor this morning? Would you bow your head, close your eyes? I want to say a prayer over you. This morning, I don't know what you're going through. I don't know what you came in from. I don't know what you're going out to. But I do know this. God loves you, and he cares about you. And more than anything, he desires a personal relationship with you. And so this morning, maybe you find yourself in the middle because you don't have a relationship with him. Maybe this morning you find yourself in the middle because you've never put your faith and your trust in him. And this morning, I want to give you an opportunity to do something that will change your life forever, and that's simply cry out to who God is. Put your faith and your trust in him. All you have to do is simply cry out to God. Say this with me. Right in your heart, every head bowed, every eye closed, simply say this. Say, dear God,